Hello.
Hey, Jason, how are you?
I'm good. Good. Just flying in here at the last minute.
Right? That's great. I'm glad that you're here.
Yes. And I have to say, I'm excited. I just closed a big deal. So, good way to start off
Congratulations.
a webinar about sales. And
Woo! That's
yeah,
awesome. Congratulations.
hey, thank you. I appreciate that.
Welcome, everyone. We're so glad that you're here. I know that we've got some people that are already on and people that are joining us. We're going to wait a few minutes while we gather the people. But just want to welcome you guys here to our Lunch and Learn here with Jason Caywood and myself, Sarah Johnson.
And Sarah, are you able to make me co host so I can share my screen when it's time?
Yes. Yep. I'd be happy to do that.
Uh, Thank you.
Okay, you got it.
Um,
You got it. Hope everyone's having a great day. If you guys want to open up your chat, I would love to interact with you. Janet, I love you. It's been so long. I'm so glad you hopped on. So good to see you. Janet's a dear friend, and we haven't had a chance to see each other forever. So glad you're here. So glad you're here. But pop on the chat and tell us where you're from. If you're from, I'm in Draper. I don't even. Jason, you're in Utah. Where
I'm
are
in
you at?
Holiday. Yep.
Holiday. Not
Yes.
too far away. That's awesome. Very good. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about storytelling, and we're going to talk about sales strategy. So you guys are going to hopefully take tons of notes today and learn a lot today. But I would love to hear from you guys if you have questions. We're going to be doing a Q&A at the end of our call. So if you have some comments or questions that you want to have answered, put those in the chat, and then we will be getting to those as the call moves forward. So to be respectful of everyone's time, I want to make sure we start and end on time. So I'll go ahead and introduce our group and tell you guys what our goals are for today, and introduce Jason, and he's going to give some incredible information about sales today. Jason and I met networking a couple months ago, and I feel like it's a great opportunity as business leaders to help support each other in the role of business. And to demonstrate that point, I want to share a quick story and really give you guys the heart and soul of the purpose of our call today. A couple of years ago, my family experienced a medical catastrophe. And I don't know if you guys have ever had a medical catastrophe, but it not only affects the medical situation, but it can be a domino effect in every other area. And we were going through a challenging time as a family. And the day before fall break happened, I told my family, I asked my husband, I'm like, let's go to the Redwood Forest. And he's like, okay. So literally the night before, we hopped in the car and drove the 15 hours to the Redwood Forest. And if you guys have been there, you know how incredible it is. It's just gorgeous. And we started our pathway on the Lady Bird Johnson Trail. The Lady Bird Johnson Trail is a 1.5 mile kind of route around the forest. And it was an incredible experience. I asked my children to be reverent because it felt so sacred to be amongst these ancient tribal leader trees who've been around over 800 years. And the fog had kind of descended through the mists, and we were the only ones there. And I turned around, and the sun had broken through the clouds, and there were pillars of light streaming through these 300-foot tall trees. And in that moment, I felt so supported and so loved and so taken care of. And it was interesting because during our time in the Redwood Forest, I found out that these trees, even though they're 300 feet tall, only have a 12-foot root system. And the way that they survive is they reach out. There's a 50-foot radial root system for every tree, and they intertwine with each other, and their root systems are intertwined. And, we saw trees that were like literally, they had holes in them because of the lightning strikes. And there were trees that had been burned and they were still alive, and trees that had withstood great storms and adversity because they had networked with each other. And I feel very strongly that as business leaders, we have an opportunity to connect with each other and learn from each other so that we can endure the storms that that we're facing and the storms that are coming. And so as I met with Jason a couple weeks ago, I recognized he has a servant heart and he genuinely cares about people and wants to support other people. And so I thought we have to connect and collaborate and create an opportunity where we can support each other. So that's my goal, is to help build a redwood forest of business leaders, and so that we can find strength in each other and support each other. So that being said, I want to introduce you guys to Jason. Jason is a sales executive with over 15 years of experience leading and developing teams. He was a client of Sandler Training for 12 years, and he experienced that transformation in his own business because of the Sandler system on his personal and professional life. And he has gone on to work with Sandler systems. He has built territories and teams from the ground up all over the country, regularly outgrowing the market by 4x and 7x, like just blowing it out of the water. Jason is a proud native of Utah and loves helping others reach their maximum potential. So I'm going to turn the time over to Jason today, and he's going to be teaching us some fantastic sales tools that you can use to increase your sales in 2021.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sarah. Just want to make sure everybody can hear me okay. We good? Okay, good. For those online, if you can turn your cameras on, that's always appreciated. If not, I may ask you some questions, so you can use the emojis, the thumbs up, the celebration. Thankfully, I don't think there's a thumbs down option yet. That's good. That would worry me. But really appreciate you guys being here. And yeah, it's been an honor getting to know Sarah. She came up with this idea. I'm like, absolutely. Just one of those people with great energy and one of those people you want to be around. And so I'm really honored to be here and excited to have everybody here. For today, I'm going to take 20, 25 minutes, not too long. And I'm going to cover something called Mrs. Q. I'll tell you what that means here in a second. But the bulk of what I'm going to talk about is how can we stop the whole thing of, I want to think it over, right? Raise your hand or give me a thumbs up if you've been in business and you've ever had a prospect say, oh, well, yeah, let me think it over and I'll get back to you. Has anyone ever heard that before? Absolutely. And do they come back sometimes? Yeah, sometimes. But a lot of time we end up just chasing them when we could expend that energy on other prospects that are actually going to work with us and are actually worth our time. So I'm going to give you a very specific tool that we teach our clients on how to do that. And I want to let you know right now, it's going to be very different from what you've seen. You're going to think, ooh, can I really do that? Yes, you can. Okay. I have clients all over the place that do it. I utilize it. So it's doable. And then at the very end, I got a quick giveaway that we'll talk about. Okay. Mrs. Q, please write down my phone number and my email address. And here's what Mrs. Q stands for. As we're going through today, if for some reason you feel like it would be beneficial for us to have a meeting, to just dive into your world, to understand your business a little bit better, doesn't mean we're going to work together, but if you think, man, there's some more I'd like to talk about, text or email me with your name and the letter M. If at some point throughout today you think, man, you know what? My friend or my neighbor or my sister or my brother, they really should talk to Jason. They were telling me something the other day that I think Jason might be able to help with, and you've got someone that you would like to refer to me. Text or email me with your name and the letter R. S stands for speaking engagements. Just like today, I love to do this. If you're part of an association, if you have a group where you bring in outside speakers and you think that I might be able to add value to that group, text or email me the letter S. And then Q just stands for question. If you just have a question, if something hits you after we're done talking today that you need clarity on, or have a question about what I'm going to share with you today, just shoot me a message with the letter Q. And whatever you send within 72 hours, we'll connect with you and make sure you've got everything taken care of. Okay? All right. So what we're going to talk about today, we internally call it upfront contracts. But what it's really all about is just setting the ground rules for any meeting you're ever going to have again, but especially with your prospects. Now, before we do that, I want to show a little clip here. Come on, this always takes a second. Hold on. All right. Well, let me make sure something here. There we go. Okay. Oh, there we go. Sorry, guys.
Can I help you? Name, please.
Seinfeld, you made a reservation for a mid-size, and she's a small. I'm kidding around, of course.
Okay, let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. We have no midsize available at the moment.
I don't understand. I made a reservation. Do you have my reservation?
Yes, we do. Unfortunately, we ran out of cars.
But the reservation keeps the car here. That's why you have the reservation.
I know why we have reservations.
I don't think you do. If you did, I'd have a car. See, you know how to take the reservation, you just don't know how to hold the reservation. And that's really the most important part of the reservation, the holding. Anybody can just take them.
Let me speak with my supervisor.
Here we go. The supervisor. You know what she's saying over there?
What?
Hey, Marge, see those two people over there? They think I'm talking to you. So you pretend like you're talking to me. Okay, now you start talking.
Oh, you mean like this? So it looks like I'm saying something, but I'm not really saying anything at all?
Okay, now you say something else, and they won't yell at me because they thought I was checking with you.
Oh, great, I did. Good, that's enough. See you later.
I'm sorry, my supervisor says there's nothing we can do.
Yeah, it looked like you were in a real conversation over there.
But we do have a compact if you would like that.
Fine.
All right. Well, we have a blue Ford Escort for you, Mr. Seinfeld. Would you like insurance?
Yeah, you better give me the insurance because I am going to beat the hell out of this thing.
Okay, so listen, we've all been in those situations where we go into a conversation expecting it to go a certain way, and then the other person all of a sudden throws a curveball, right? Or we go into this conversation with a prospect thinking, hey, I need 45 minutes to do my full discovery call. And they say, yeah, I got 15 minutes. What do you need? Right? So what I'm about to teach you is going to help you on both sides. And it actually makes it a better interaction for the prospect as well. But on our side of things, when we fully implement this, it gives us some control, some consistency, right? For the buyer or the prospect, it's going to give them some clarity. It's going to help them understand, all right, this is where we're going, right? So one of our rules, you cannot blame buyers for doing something you didn't tell them they couldn't do, right? How many times, again, do we fall into their system, chasing around, doing whatever they tell us to do, right? We've got to think a different way. We've got to set things up in a different way. So this is the meat of what we're going to be talking about. An upfront contract has 5 components, and it is sequential. And I'm going to talk about each one of these, but then I will role play one, okay? And I'll just let you know what it might sound like in real life. So first of all, when you're setting up a meeting, let's, Sean, I've got a quick question for you. Sean, if you were to, in your world, I don't know your world, but do you have like maybe an initial conversation with a prospect and then set up a longer conversation? What does the front end of your world look like, Sean?
Most of the time, yeah. Most of the time there's a conversation of some kind, and then we set up a time to go into more detail later.
Perfect. That's wonderful. And everybody's process is a little bit different, but Sean, I'm going to use that example for today. Okay. So let's pretend you have that initial conversation and you both agree it makes sense to set up the longer conversation and the deeper dive, right? Well, first of all, you kind of already understand what's the purpose. This is why we're now going to get together again. We need to dive in a little bit deeper, understand, hey, what's going on in your world. Now, the second part is time. First of all, yeah, the date and the time. Hey, Sean, next Thursday at 3:00 would be best for me. All right, yeah, that works. But we also need to make sure we're on the same page for the duration of the meeting, right? In my world, my second meeting lasts an hour, okay, or up to an hour. So here's what that sounds like. Hey, Sean, when you're looking in your calendar, this next meeting could take up to an hour if everything goes well, all right? So you let them know on the front end, we need to block out this time. Now you can add something in to make them feel a little more comfortable. Hey, Sean, look, I'm not going to hold you hostage. We're going to know after about 15 or 20 minutes if we should keep talking. But if all goes well, it could take up to an hour. So on the very beginning of setting up that next meeting, we want to make sure not just the start time of the meeting, but what's the duration that we need, the salesperson, the business owner, What's the duration that we need based on our sales process? Okay. Next, we want to understand their agenda, the prospect's agenda. And here's a very simple way to do that. Hey, Sean, help me understand, what do you want to make sure that we talk about at this next meeting? And just let them list it up. Well, I want to talk about this. I want to understand pricing. I want to, understand this and want to dive in a little bit deeper. And the whole time you're taking notes. All right, yep, absolutely. We'll get there. And here's a little trick. When they finish their list, you always want to say, anything else? Okay. You just want to make sure they've got everything in their brain. They're telling it to you and you're writing it down. And your answer is always, yep, I'll make sure we get to that stuff. I'll make sure we cover that. After you get their agenda, and this is going to be a big shift, you guys, you talk about your agenda. But I have to tell you something. Your agenda has nothing to do with what you want to tell them. Your agenda is all about the questions you want to ask them. So for example, I could say in my world, well, hey, Sean, when we get together, I want to tell you about our training programs and what that looks like and da-da-da-da-da-da. But it's all features and benefits. Okay, a side note, stop selling features and benefits. But we don't want to do that. Here's what I want to do. Here's what it would sound like from my world. Hey, Sean, when we get together, I'm going to have some questions about your sales team. I'm going to want to understand, what's their performance been like this year? Where have you guys really excelled? Where have you guys struggled? Sean, are you okay with me asking you questions like this? And then you wait for a verbal confirmation. Now, here's why we do this, for a couple reasons. Again, raise your hand to give a thumbs up if you've ever felt like a prospect has lied to you or not given you the full information. Has that ever happened to anybody? Yes. So what we're doing is we're telling them up front the important questions that we're going to be asking, and we're getting their approval. We're getting their verbal commitment that they are going to answer those questions. Because let's think about it. Too often, companies offer a solution based on the half information that they've been given from the prospect. So in order for us to understand, first of all, are we a good fit for this prospect? Because we might not be. Excuse me. But secondly, what solution might we offer them? Well, we need real information. We need as honest of information from them as possible. So when we talk about our agenda, the two things are, number one, your agenda is all about the questions you're going to ask. It has nothing to do with information that you're going to give them. Secondly, you need to ask for their verbal commitment. Sean, are you okay with me asking you questions like that? And then stop. And you wait for them to say, yeah, that's fine. Now, lastly, again, this is probably going to be different than what you've seen over the years. Now you talk about the outcomes of the meeting. And remember what I said this is all about, is eliminating think it overs. This is where it happens. So after you've shared your agenda and what you want to ask, you then say, hey, Sean, at the end of this meeting, there's two potential outcomes. On the one hand, if at any point I feel like I'm not a positive resource for you, I will tell you that. Okay. Now, most salespeople are not willing to offer up the first outcome being them saying no. But let me ask you, Janet, if you had a salesperson telling you, hey, Janet, it's possible that I might tell you that I'm not the right resource for you, what would that make you feel a little more comfortable? Would that make you feel a little less pressured?
Absolutely, because then I know that they know the limits or their expectations of what they can offer, as well as it releases me to be able to say, okay, I have an out if I need one.
Yes, absolutely. So keep in mind, guys, if we're the first ones to bring up the possibility of saying no, that's going to lower their defenses. That's, we have something called bonding and rapport, right? That's going to help with bonding and rapport. Now, here's the next piece of that. Hey, along those same lines, Sean, if at any point along the way you feel like I'm not a positive resource for you, are you comfortable telling me that? And then stop. Now, again, have you ever been in a situation where somebody probably really wanted to tell you no, but they were too nice. And so now they said, hey, let me think about it and I'll get back to you, because they didn't want to hurt your feelings, right? Well, here's what we're doing. Like Janet said, we're giving them an out if they really do want to say no. But we got to get their verbal commitment. And I'll tell you why here in a second. So it starts with, hey, if at any point along the way I feel like I'm not a positive resource for you, I'll tell you that. And along those lines, if at any point along the way you feel like I'm not a positive resource for you, are you comfortable telling me that? And you wait for them to say, yeah, sure. However, on the other hand, if we get to the end of this meeting and we both agree that it makes sense for us to talk further, we'll take the last couple minutes of the call and design together what that looks like. Does that sound fair? Now, the yes outcome that I just did, that's a very general one. You could have a more specific one. I have a client who they are a trucking company. And here's an example of what their yes would sound like. And on the other hand, if we get to the end of this meeting and we both agree it makes sense to take the next step, here's what yes looks like in that situation. We would get another meeting on the calendar. I would go away and put sample rates together. And then we would get back together at that next meeting to review the sample rates. So if you have a specific yes or next step, it's okay to insert it in there. All right. So before I do one all together, let me just remind you what we're doing here. First of all, we're putting them at ease, right? We're getting on the same page with the prospect. We're being on a level playing ground, which is extremely important when we're dealing with prospects. Secondly, we know what to expect. They know what to expect. We're showing them respect by getting their agenda. We are making sure that they're going to answer our questions that we really need to have answered. They've committed to that. And then they have agreed to say either no, this doesn't make sense, or yes, and here's what the next steps are. So you're taking away that, oh, well, let me think about it, because here's what we need to do. If we get to the end and like, oh, let me think about it, here's one of the toughest things is you need to hold them accountable to the agreement. Hey, Sean, I'm a little confused. When we first started the meeting, we both agreed that we'd either say, you know what, it's not a fit and shake hands and part as friends, or we would say yes, and here's what that next step was. So I'm confused at you wanting to think it over, right? And that's not easy, but we all need to be held accountable, especially if we've agreed to something. So let me walk through this all the way through. All right, Sarah, I'm going to use you as a prospect, but here's all I want you to do. When just give me a time and keep that pretty straightforward. But when I ask your agenda, just for the sake of time, you can say, hey, I want to talk about A, B, and C. Okay.
Okay.
So, hey, Sarah, I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and I'm glad we both think it makes sense for us to talk again next week. Now, for this next meeting, if all goes well, it could take up to 60 minutes. Now, look, I'm not going to hold you hostage. If we both, we're going to know after 15 minutes if we should keep talking or not. But as you're looking in your calendar, find a 60-minute block that works for you. All right. So what do you think might work next week?
Great. I hold my meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I've got Thursday afternoon available. Would 1 o'clock work for you?
Yeah, I can do that. So from 1 to 2, I'm going to send you a calendar invite with a Zoom link. Okay. Now,
Perfect.
When we get to that meeting next week, what do you want to make sure that we cover?
I'm concerned about A, B, and then there's all that stuff with C that's just driving me nuts.
Hey, no, that's fair. I hear that a lot. Is there anything else?
Sometimes D is a huge problem.
Okay. Listen, I've written all that down and I will make sure we touch on that when we talk next week. Okay. Now, Sarah, from my side of things, when we get together, I'm going to have some questions for you. I'm going to have some questions around your sales team. I'm going to have some questions around performance, dive into numbers a little bit. I'm going to have some questions around, who are your rock stars? Who are your B players and who are your C players? Are you comfortable with me asking you questions like that?
You know what? I am. You've done a great job so far, and I think that you can help guide me through some of those challenges we're facing. So yeah.
Great. I appreciate that. And then last thing, Sarah, for a meeting like this, there's 2 potential outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
If at any point along the way, I feel like I'm not a positive resource for you, I'm going to tell you that. Okay.
That's fair. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And along those lines, if at any point along the way you feel like I'm not a positive resource for you, are you comfortable telling me that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate that. On the other side of things, though, if we get to the end of that meeting and we both agree that it makes sense for us to talk further, we'll just take the last couple minutes of that meeting and design together what that looks like. Does that sound fair?
I think that's totally fair. I'm really comfortable with that. Yeah.
Right. And let's just say this, Sarah, anything less than that, we'll just call it a no for now. Okay?
Perfect. That's perfect.
Okay. So again, guys, yes, I've done this for many, many years. It's taken me a long time to let it just roll off my tongue like that. But I want to ask you, in theory, does that make sense? Janet, does something like that make sense? Do you see the value in setting up a meeting like that?
Absolutely, because it gives clear expectations, which for me is extremely important.
Absolutely. Sean, how about you? Is this kind of coming together? I know I'm throwing a lot at you all at once, but is this making sense?
Yeah, it does. It's helpful.
Good. Good. Now, one thing I want to remind you of is let's pretend now it's next week and you're at that meeting. You're going to start by reviewing the upfront agreement again. Okay. And here's what that would sound like. Hey, Sarah, good to see you again. Glad we're here. Now, when we set this meeting up, we initially set aside 60 minutes. Does that still work for you?
Yeah. Yeah. I've got another call at 2. So, but I have the whole hour blocked out.
Great. I appreciate that. Now, also, Sarah, when we talked last time, you said you wanted to make sure we covered this, 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 and this.
Mm-hmm.
Since we spoke last, has anything else come to your mind that you want to make sure we touch on today?
You know what? I had this weird situation that happened with, something else, but it's not a super urgent issue. So if we have time, we can talk about it. But if not, that's fine too.
Okay. All right. Well, if we need to talk about it, let's do that.
Okay.
Also, from my side, I told you I was going to ask you questions like this, 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 and this. Are you still okay with me asking you those questions?
Sure. Yeah.
And then as a final reminder, here's the outcomes that we agreed to. Again, if at any point I feel like I'm not a positive resource for you, I'll tell you. You said that if you feel that way at any point along the discussion, that you'll tell me that. Is that still the case?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And then lastly, if we both agree that it makes sense for us to talk further, we'll take the last few minutes and design together what that looks like. Is that still good with you?
That's perfect. Yep. That's great.
So again, we say upfront contracts should be the bookends to every meeting you have. Right? Now, I will say this. I want everybody to know, as the relationship goes on, you're going to massage this a little bit, right? Because if you develop a relationship where you do what you say you're going to do and your client now says what they're going to do, you don't have to go through it as surgically, okay? But especially on the front end of that relationship, those initial meetings, right? And let me give you one real world example of a variation of this. I have a brand new client that we just signed our agreement, and I've been working on it all year long. It's a big credit union out of Florida, okay? And our first, thank you, our first big presentation of our solution, right out of the gate, they said, hey, we just want you to know we're not going to be making a decision on this call today. Great. So when we got to the end of it, here's what I ensured that we did. I asked, well, hey, what does it look like? What do you guys need to do? Well, we need to get together as a group. Then we need to bring in Joel and Chad and get their thoughts. Okay, well, how long do you think that's going to take? Well, probably, we can get that done in the next 10 days. Great. Well, 10 days away is, let's say it's the 23rd. If I don't hear from you by the 23rd, who should I reach out to on the 24th? Well, reach out to Sean. Okay, great. So even though it wasn't exactly as I just described, we still left the meeting with a clear future. Write that phrase down. Clear future. How many times have we left a meeting? Hey, this sounds really good. Let me talk with the boss and I'll get back to you in a couple weeks. And then nothing. We're calling them. Hey, a couple weeks gone by and just wanted to see how things were going. 2 days later, left you a voicemail. Not sure if you got that. So I thought I'd send you an email. Where are things at? We all know what it's like when we leave a meeting without a clear future. So that's our goal here, is that we know exactly what the next steps are. Okay. When should we use upfront contracts? Truly, every possible chance we get, right? That deal that I closed just right before this call, I finished with an upfront contract. I said, hey, can I take a couple minutes and tell you exactly what's going to happen over the next few days? Yeah, sure. Well, I'm going to put together our agreement and I'm going to put everything we've talked about in there and I'm going to send it over to you for review and signature. Once you send that back, we're going to do this, 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 and this. And then, so you want to use these when you've brought on a new client as well. So they know exactly what's happening, right? And Sean, you mentioned you might have that initial conversation. Same thing there. My sales process starts with a 15-minute conversation. And I set it up very easily. Hey, this is just a chance for us to get to know each other a little bit and decide if we want to talk again or not. Does that sound fair? Like I make it very basic, very basic. But you could do a full one of these even on a 15-minute conversation, right? So let me, let's see. We talked about this a little bit. Well, what if it's breached? Well, that's where we have to decide, are we going to put our foot down? Or are we just going to fall into the prospects, their system and be at their mercy, right? If you do it with the right tonality, if you do it with the right approach, you absolutely can hold people accountable. And most times they just forget. They're not trying to do it maliciously. Real world story, one of my very first clients, talking to the VP of sales, we had the upfront contract, what yes looked like, no looked like. And he said, hey, he's like, this looks good. I've got to talk with our CFO because we're putting our budget together for next year. Let me talk with him next week and I'll get back to you. Now, I could have wimped out and said, okay, I'll wait to hear from you. But I said, hey, Colin, I'm a little confused. When we set this up, we agreed either no or yes, and we'd schedule out the next meeting. And guess what he said? He's like, oh my gosh, you're right. I completely forgot. And then he said, look, I can talk to him by Tuesday of next week. And this is on a Friday. I'll talk to him by Tuesday next week. And, but let's give a little cushion. Let's set up our next meeting for next Friday. Okay, great. Well, hey, what are we going to talk about at that next meeting, Colin? Well, by then I'll have our training budget for the year, and then we can, decide exactly what we're going to be doing together. Great. All right. So if somebody forgets, or especially if they are trying to be malicious and manipulative, we as salespeople and business owners, we have every right to stand our ground. We have every right to be on level footing with them and make sure that we're on the same page. So last thing with Sandy, with these kind of no wishy-washy words, right? It's okay to be confident and firm in what we're saying. So for example, we're not saying, hey, is it okay with you if I talk about this or if I ask these questions? No, we're letting them know, hey, these are the questions I need to ask, right? No mind reading. A lot of mind reading goes on in traditional way of selling. And then lastly, no mutual mystification, which is the opposite of, identifying that clear future. What do those next steps look like? Right? I had somebody, one last example, I had somebody that said, hey, we've really thought about this. It's a small company. We really thought about this and we want to get started in February. Okay, this just happened last week. And I responded, I said, hey, that's fair. I said, but in order to start in February, we're going to need to talk in the middle of January. So looking at the week of January 18th, when would you like to schedule that meeting? Well, how about the 18th at 10:30? Okay, great. And I sent them a calendar invite. Now, if they said, oh, I don't feel comfortable setting up a meeting, then I'm going to know right away they're not serious, and that's okay. That's okay. All right. Now, before we go on, we're wrapping up here. Any questions? Again, I know this is a lot. It's probably different from what you're, traditionally done. But any questions, any clarifying questions, anything I can offer any guidance on, or any help to just understand this concept and this technique?
I have one question.
Yes,
Carol. So back at the beginning, when you're setting the agenda and getting the client gives you their agenda, and then you say, I want to ask these questions, and maybe it's information you need to understand about their business to help you, develop your recommendations for them. How do you, if they say, no, I'm not going to answer those questions, I don't want to give you that information, or how do you, they don't want you to ask those questions. How do you pivot from that?
Carol, great question, first of all. So I want us to step back for a second and really think about what we're trying to accomplish when we talk with a prospect, right? we're really genuinely trying to understand their situation. We're genuinely trying to see what's going on in their world and do we have a solution for them or not. So if they're not willing to answer our questions and be open and honest with us, is it even worth our time to meet with them? So that's where we would have to ask ourselves. Here's what I would do, Carol. If somebody said that to me, I would say, hey, I appreciate that, Sarah, but we have a problem. Well, what's that? Listen, if you can't answer those types of questions and if you don't feel comfortable being open with me, then I can't help you. Because when I work with my clients, I have to make sure that I am dealing with the real issue. And again, if you're not comfortable with that, that's okay. That's fine. But I just don't think it makes sense for us to meet at this point. Again, take some guts to do that. But if we really care about our time, if we really value our time as a business owner, as a salesperson, why would we want to meet with that person? We want to get away from the old mentality of, oh, if I just throw enough at the wall and if I beg and plead, maybe they'll like something. Maybe they'll want to work with me. All right. So Carol, great question. And one more example from a colleague of mine. He's meeting with a business owner and had a rock solid upfront contract. And as the meeting is going on, my colleague starting to recognize that the business owner is not being honest with him. So right in the middle of the meeting, my colleague closes up his folder, stands up and starts walking away. And the business owner says, what are you doing? He said, hey, look, I really appreciate you inviting me here today, but I get the feeling that you're not being very open and honest with me, and that's not helpful for either of us. So I'm going to take off. I appreciate your time. And the business owner says, whoa, hold on. And he stops for a second and he says, all right, you're right. I haven't been very open and honest with you. Sit down. Let's try this again. And the guy became a client of my colleagues, right? My colleague had the guts to stand up for himself and say, look, I don't want to waste either of our time. I'm heading out of here. So Carol, great question, but it is difficult. We've got to have that conviction of what we're willing to put up with and how we want to have our sales process operate. Okay. All right. Last thing, just a reminder, you've got my information. So if you have any desire to meet with me, just to dive in deeper, and again, I have no idea if I can help you. I don't know enough, but I'm happy to have a conversation. If you have any potential referrals for me, if you have any speaking engagements, free talks, free webinars like this, I'd love to help out anywhere I can, or just any clarifying questions. Please shoot me a text with your name in the letter or an email with your name in the letter. And then what I will do for anyone that sends something over, I'll put you into a drawing for one of these two books. Asking Questions the Sandler Way, written by a friend and colleague of mine. Best book I've ever read on asking questions. And then the 49 Sandler Rules. All right. Thank you all so much. This has been great. Obviously, I'm sticking around the rest of the time. We'll have some Q&A after. So if something else comes up, we'll have time for that. But thank you all so much.
That was phenomenal. I'd love to hear from you guys. What was your takeaway from Jason? What did you like about what he shared?
I'll go.
Go for it. Yeah. Yay.
It is so hard to be able to give that kind of information in a way that makes sense. And you did an excellent job. So thank you for that, making it simple, making it understandable. So for me, and what I'm fixing to go into with my business, it really helps have a very clear understanding with the client. And so I appreciate you talking about getting a verbal yes, and making it real clear what the expectations are on both sides with the out up front. Hey, if this isn't a good match, I'm going to let you know. And if this isn't a good match for you, just let me know, because it doesn't serve either of us in a positive way. So thank you for that.
I love that you're getting a yes on a non-consequential issue. So you're not waiting to say, hey, do you want to buy my product? And you're waiting for a yes until you get to that question. You're getting them used to saying yes to something that's really safe and easy and simple. I love that.
No, thank you both. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, now it's time to transition to the star of the day. I'm just the warm-up act. All right. But no, again, it's been an honor getting to know Sarah. I look forward to, many interactions to come for sure. And I'm very excited. So, Sarah's lifelong passion is writing. Her work's been seen in newspapers, social media outlets, blogs, websites, newsletters, printed materials for more than 350 companies. She served as the editor for 3 full-length novels. She's written a memoir, biography, and 2 cookbooks, in addition to writing over 4,000 pages of marketing copy. She co-founded Jambo John. It's a website development company located in Draper, Utah, and she serves as the vice president for the Evans Biography Award. The University of Utah provided the backdrop for her organizational communications bachelor's degree. She's been married to her college sweetheart for 20 years. They are the proud parents of 4 children, and she loves anything that has to do with the garden, cozying up to a good love story, and baking chocolate chip cookies. So welcome, Sarah Johnson, please.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. I really appreciate that introduction. And I'm so glad to be with you guys for a little bit of time. Excuse me, hopefully this is your best lunch period of your entire week. So as Jason and I were talking, it became apparent to me that telling a good story is a fundamentally important part of communicating to an audience. And so what I want to do over the next couple minutes is dive into some psychology and talk about why storytelling is an effective tool to be able to get people's attention and to really find out what is at the heart and soul of their challenges. We're going to talk about problem solving, which I love Jason touched upon that. I'm going to talk about a storytelling formula that is so easy to remember that as you're developing content for your business, whether it's social media or email marketing, or even during your sales presentation, that it's going to be easy for you to remember the storytelling formula. And then I'll give you guys some examples of corporations that are doing this and stories from my own life that have helped me as well. And then I'm going to finish off by identifying the stories you need to know for your business. There's 4 stories, sometimes 3, mostly 4 stories that you need to have practice, just like Jason talked about having a script. And it's easy for him to share that with people and be in the moment with people because it's scripted. Having those stories is going to make a really, really, really powerful impact on your business. So first off, psychology. Why does storytelling work? Has anybody here studied or heard of the reticular activating system? Yes, Jason has. I'm seeing some nods. It's a piece of your brain that's about the size of a pen, and it resides on the back of your head. And the reticular activating system is actually the brain's filter between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. So what happens is our subconscious mind is our program. It's the computer that actually runs the system. Does anyone know how much information our brain processes every second, our subconscious brain? Throughout numbers, you can either unmute yourself or you can put it in the chat. What's your guess? How many bits of information does your subconscious brain process every second?
Ridiculous amount.
Yeah, yes. Throw out a number. Just guess.
6 billion.
Ooh, that's a really big guess. Not quite that high. And I'm not a neuroscience. This is just what Google told me. Who else has a guess?
Oh, Google. 3,000.
That's a good guess. And it's bigger than that. 11 million bits of information our brain processes every second. And that's like, what's my liver doing? And what chemicals does my body need to make sure that
Oh, well, sure, that makes sense.
And what kind of memories is my heater kicking back from my childhood? And really what your brain is doing is your brain is designed to do 2 things: keep you safe and use as few calories as possible. And so everything that happens in your world runs through that filter. Does that make sense? And if you're not, if it doesn't pass the safety and easy, your brain will actually make it so you can't see something. There's a show on Disney Plus, I believe it's called Brain Games. Have you guys ever seen that? It's really cool. They talk about optical illusions and how your brain functions. So this optical illusion showed that there are like 15 footballs flying across the screen. And the narrator said, choose one football and just look at that one football and tell me what happened. So we were lasering in on that football and everything else disappeared. And he said, what happened? And the person responding said, all the footballs disappeared. He said, they actually didn't. What happened was there was too much information and you were only focusing on one thing. So your brain actually made everything else disappear. So for example, if you're buying a new car, you buy, like we just bought a new red Honda Civic. And then all of a sudden I'm like, where did all the red Honda Civics come from? I didn't know that there were so many of those things out there. Or, you know, when you're a kid and you learn a vocabulary word and you're like, ostentatious is a word. And then all of a sudden you're like, that word is everywhere. The reason why is because that word has gone through the filter and it's now available in your conscious mind to see. What does this have to do with storytelling? What does this have to do with marketing copy? Number one is if your content, if your product or service does not solve a problem, people will not even see that you exist. Does that make sense? So if you have, you're like one of those footballs that's flying and you're like working so hard and you're throwing things up in the air. If you are not keeping somebody alive and you're not making it easy for them to stay alive, their brain will not even allow them to see you. And our brains don't know the difference between I'm a caveman, I'm in danger because a lion is coming to eat me, or a mountain lion in Provo Canyon. You guys saw that viral video a couple weeks ago. Or, you know, stress with quarantine or stress with job loss or just the general challenges that we're facing. So my number one recommendation is be really clear about what problem you solve. And number two, we want to make it really easy for people to know that you can help solve that problem. And the reason why storytelling works really, really well is because it's easy for people to understand. I love what Jason said, like get rid of the facts and benefits. Don't dive into a sales presentation with features and benefits. They don't care. They do not care about your features and benefits until you can show them that you solve a problem. And so what happens is when we're telling stories, what happens in our minds is that we replace our own experience with the storyteller's experience. And we start imagining ourselves inside that story. And a really effective story takes somebody from a journey from problems and challenges. There's some, well, I'll go through the thing, but we go from a state of problems to a state of transformation or change. And so if you tell a really good story, your potential client can see themselves taking that journey. Does that make sense? Are you guys with me so far? Okay, so what I want to do, I'm going to dive into a really simple story formula. This is so easy. Now, before I tell you the easy formula, I want to tell you how hard it can be. There are 7 basic story archetypes. Hero's journey, there's rags to riches, there's like go and return, there's tragedy, there's lots of storytelling formulas. Typically, when you go to a movie, or if you read a Harry Potter book, my daughter, she's reading an 800-page Harry Potter book, right? You have time to go through it, and maybe there's 9 or 12 or 21 steps to get through your story, right? And you want to have that emotional journey. Do you have that time on your social media feed to give people that full storytelling formula? You don't. And so what I want to do is give you a 3-step storytelling formula that you can apply to any copywriting or any messaging that you're doing. The first thing that you need to do is explain the before. You want to explain what the ordinary looks like. What was, for example, with Star Wars, they showed Luke Skywalker on a boring, dead planet, living with his aunt and uncle. They showed what it was like before anything exciting happened to him. So for your client, for Jason, I know his business a little bit. His client might be a business owner that's spending 12 hours a day running his business and only closing 12% of his leads, right? Like, what does the ordinary look like, feel like? The second thing that has to happen is there has to be some kind of an explosion. There has to be some kind of disruption. And for some people, this is a painful experience. You hear the phrase of things become so painful that you have to make a change. People do things because they're in pain before they do things because of pleasure. You're so sick and tired of being sick and tired that you're finally willing to do something. But it could be something easy. I mean, it could be like you had a broken leg, or it could be like your tooth hurt, right? That there's some kind of an explosion in their life. And the third piece that you're describing is the after. What does it look like after their problem is solved? Now, of the 7 storytelling archetypes, we use the hero's journey the most frequently, and this is why. Your hero's journey is your Star Wars model, where you have a hero, and the hero is introduced into an unusual world. They're called into a world that they didn't know existed, and they're introduced to a mentor. In the case of Luke Skywalker, the mentor is Yoda, right? And he teaches Luke Skywalker, and he gives him tools, and he gives him skills and new mindset and new training. And eventually the mentor always dies. I hate to break it to you, but the mentor always goes away in the stories, and the hero is left to his own vices to defeat the bad guy. Does that make sense? So as you're telling stories, rather than putting yourself in that hero's position, let your client be in that position. Let your client's journey tell the story of triumph. And I want you to put yourself in the position of that mentor. What is the product or service that you provide that's going to help bridge the gap between their ordinary life, their before life, and their afterlife? And how can you be in that pivotal place? So I'm going to tell a story, and this is a true story, and I'm going to give this story as an example if I were to be selling a product. Okay, now let's pretend like I were selling ham radios. Does anyone here have a ham radio? Anybody? Okay, the cool thing about a ham radio, this is a feature and benefit. Okay, the cool thing about a ham radio is that it follows the arc of the earth, versus regular radios just go in a straight line. So the radio frequency doesn't go very far, but a ham radio follows the curve of the earth, and that's why it goes farther. Do you guys want to buy a ham radio now that I told you that? Okay, you can go to Amazon, and there's colored ham radios with cool buttons. Do you guys want to buy a ham radio? There are ham radios that go really far, and you can get them for like $1,200, and they're cool. You guys want a ham radio now, right? No, you don't. That's so boring. Okay, I'm going to show an example of how you can put a product in somebody's story. All right. My grandfather was a student at East High School. That's where I graduated from. We had some deep roots in that area, and he was a scientist. He ended up going on to invent computer graphics. He was a really smart man. And as a high school student, he jimmy rigged his own ham radio. He actually put a ham radio together, and he invented what I believe was the first social network. And over the ham radio airwaves, he made a friend in Hawaii, and they played chess on the ham radio together. First social network. And so he skipped out on Sunday school. He tricked his family to think he was at the church down the street on Sunday morning, but he was actually at home playing with his friend. And as it so happened to be, it was about 11 o'clock in Salt Lake City on December 7th, 1941. And his friend that was on the ham radio was a firsthand witness to the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And so there were huge explosions, and there was loud sounds, and this kid that he was playing on the ham radio over the ham radio airwaves was telling my grandfather what was happening. And he was stunned. He was flabbergasted about what was happening. They finished off the call, and what was left was an empty, large house with a large grandfather clock, and he can hear the ticking throughout this huge home. And he had this moment where he said, I can pretend like nothing happened, or I could race back to the church and tell my family and my friends that the United States just entered World War II. And so my great uncle Wayne told me he remembered my grandfather running out of this house and met them as they were walking home and told him what happened. And My grandfather started that game as a high school student. He left that game. He would go on 4 years to serve in World War II. Now, I'm not selling ham radios, but if I were selling ham radios, wouldn't you want to buy one that could get a clear signal to Hawaii during a war? Right? Now, there's stories of dragons and princesses and knights, and the knight has to slay the dragon with a sword. Let's pretend like your business is the sword, and let's tell the story that's around the sword. So don't just start with like, hey, the sword is really shiny and it's made of cool metal and it's sharp. This sword is really sharp. No, let's tell the story about what was it like for that princess in the tower? What was it like for that prince to be called to that adventure? What was it like for him to wield that sword, and where did he find it? So when you're selling a tool, a tool is something that helps somebody else accomplish something. When you're selling a tool, your marketing needs to be located in the explosion. Does that make sense? So, and I don't know what all of your guys' businesses are, but I know Sean, I'll pick on Sean for a minute. And then I'm going to pick on Bill, because he's a good friend of mine, if he can. Sean, you are a business coach. So where is the explosion? Where does it become painful for business leaders that they decide they need to hire a coach?
I think in most cases, it's when they're dealing with some type of an issue that either one, they don't know how to fix, or they don't want to fix it. They want to have someone else take care of it, or that's not an area that they're comfortable with, whatever it may be. But it's either one that they just don't want to deal with it, or they just don't know how.
Yes, I love that. Okay, Bill, do you have time to chat?
I do.
Okay, this is my good friend Bill. Tell us, what is the explosion in your practice?
The explosion in my practice.
Uh-huh.
You'll have to forgive me a little bit. I was pulled away for a short time when.
Oh, that's okay.
So.
Okay, Bill is a dentist. Dr. Holmberg is a dentist. And so the explosion that causes people to call you in an emergency is what?
Any toothache or chip or anything when we already have a full day, and
right.
Suddenly we have more that we need to address and take care of and help.
Yes.
It happens.
It does happen. And I'm so grateful. Like on Sunday morning, my son's tooth chipped, and my son was like, Mom, is the tooth part supposed to come out? I'm like, no. So I called Bill and I'm like, Bill, what should we do? Right. So each of you guys have thank you so much, Bill. Each of you have in your business, you have that moment when your client is in the middle of the explosion. And I want you to think about how can you market to that group of people and make sure your messaging is clear what problem you solve. So Sean, I would be really specific as you're diving into your marketing. Maybe you list 12 problems that you solve and be really specific and say, I help with problem A and problem B and problem C. And you can come up with a story that describes how you're that mentor in the middle of that crisis and how you're going to lead them from the before to the after. Does that make sense? Okay, another example. I actually got this story last week. Eric McHenry owns Viking Automotive. It's on State Street in about 6900 South. He does phenomenal work if you need a mechanic. Oil changes. He's like just down to earth, really, really cool guy. Some of you guys might know Eric, but he told us the story. He was working with a fleet of vehicles just recently, and he bought every owner of this fleet, he bought them a tire pressure gauge, right? Tire pressure gauges are what, $4? And he got on a call and he trained all of the people on this fleet, every time you get gas, I want you to check your tires. No big deal, that's super easy. This simple tool ended up saving 12% on gas, which equated to $120,000 a year savings. I was like, what? You need to tell that story, because if you have a vehicle fleet, like $120,000 a year savings just for like a $3 tool. That's a no-brainer. So like the stories don't have to be super huge and dramatic like a World War II story. It can be as simple as, and I'll tell a story about Dr. Holmberg because he's our dentist. Lots of stories with Dr. Holmberg, with our dentist, but I have kids who are terrified of getting their teeth drilled, terrified. And my son, Ben, we have to have him anesthetized to have his dental work done. And we have an upcoming thing happening with my son. And my son is excited about getting his tooth fixed. He's not even worried at all. And I know that my son's, his mouth is going to be good. He's going to be healthier, and it's not going to be traumatic for him because Dr. Holmberg's provided such a great experience for him. Versus other dentists, when I've had my kids crying and people saying, can you make your kids stop crying? You're freaking everybody out, right? So whatever you do with your business, you can come up with a before, an explosion, and an after story that helps. The 4 stories that you need to be able to tell. The founder story. So if you are self-employed, this is your story. What is the why behind your passion in this business? Or if it's a founder, what was the story that created this business? If you are not employed by somebody else, if this is your own business, you need to know your I story. And typically it's the story of why you started this business. And then I want you to tell, why have you stayed? What is the story? What is the journey that has created this opportunity for you? The third story that I would suggest that you tell is your customer story. This is really so helpful when you have customers' testimonials. And sometimes we don't know the before and the after, depending on what kind of business you're in, but making it a concerted effort to know that is really, really important. So one of our clients is Wasatch Pup, and she is a puppy breeder, high-end puppy breeder, and does a phenomenal job. We have a dog, which is something I never thought I'd ever say that we had. But as she was talking to me, she told me how having a puppy can help people with anxiety and depression. And just sitting with a dog can help slow your heart rate down and help alleviate some of the burdens that you are experiencing. And she started telling me about some of her clients that had that experience. And I was like, I don't care if a dog poops in my house and I have to train a naughty puppy. I want to have the benefits of having a puppy in my own life. And so we ended up getting a dog, which is so crazy. The last story that you can tell is a product story. So figure out what kind of before and after you can tell with a specific product. So that's kind of your hero. You know, if you have a slaying the dragon, you're selling the sword that actually killed the dragon. So how does your product or your story kind of fit in that in that example? Okay, so to finish out my little portion of today, I'm going to show you guys a video. It was produced by Chick-fil-A last Thanksgiving Day parade, so 2019. And you know, there's great commercials and there's great things. And as I watched this commercial, I was like, they nailed it. They did such a good job. And I wanted to show you guys how storytelling could actually be used in marketing. So this is a 2-minute clip from Chick-fil-A. And I want you guys to see if you can notice the before, the explosion, the after. And this particular product is not selling a tool for that explosion. They're selling a result at the end of the story. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on, and I will get your guys' feedback when we're finished with this.
Let's make a snowman. Dad? Sorry, kiddo. Want to make a snowman? I can't see.
You're right on time.
Me?
Of course. You want to make a snowman, right?
Hey, what's that?
That's lost time. And there's time that flies. Together time. The best kind. It can make memories that last forever.
I wish my family could understand.
Here, sometimes people just need a little reminder.
Where are you?
Time to go, son.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Dad, guess what? Parents took me to a time shop where there's so many clubs you can use. Lost time, time that flies, and all kinds of time. And here, the kind you give.
What is this? Okay, everybody. There we go.
This is actually really hard to find out. Oh, it's snowing.
What did you guys think? Could you guys see the before? You set up what was happening before? Yeah, go ahead, Jenna.
No, I was just gonna say Christmas commercials always make me cry. But because the story is about family connection, it's not about Chick-fil-A, but at the end you can see the sponsorship and you go, okay, that was really good. Thanks for not being in my face with Chick-fil-A, but bringing me into the experience and making me feel the emotion and making me want to go, yes, I need to stop and I need to not worry about dinner. Let's just go get Chick-fil-A and spend time together.
Right? Did they tell you that they have yummy warm pickles on their chicken sandwich? No. Did they tell you that they have to give you extra ketchup because their fries are so yummy that they require more ketchup? Actually, they didn't tell you that, right? They didn't say, we're going to say my pleasure when you say thank you. Not listing the benefits. It was just a story. After I saw that, the next day it snowed with my family, and my son, he's 7 now, is really into Beyblades, and we made a snow Beyblade arena and played Beyblades out in the snow. And seriously, the next day I'm like, I'm gonna go to Chick-fil-A because I want to, and I was so inspired by that commercial. That's a really good example of how to use storytelling in your ads. And guess what? I don't remember a single other ad from that show that I watched, but I remember that one. When you're telling a story, you have to have 4 components. You have to tell a story about a specific person. So dive into somebody that has a name, that has a face. Number 2, tell specific details. So for example, like, what does it feel? I'm playing with a pen. What does it feel like to hold a pen in your hand? What does it feel like to have a sweater brush up against your skin? Maybe it was the smell of perfume. But anchor your story into specific details. And then you want to share a moment, like an actual thing that happened in a singular moment. And the last thing that I would suggest is that you convey some kind of emotion. So maybe you're trying to convey a feeling of anger or frustration or resentment. Maybe you're trying to convey a feeling of hope, of light, of purpose. But you can craft stories and go into your database. Your brain is a tool that will serve you, and that it can extract beautiful stories and beautiful moments that you can share with people. I for sure feel like, and encourage you guys to share statistics, to share the features and benefits, and to share your programs in detail, but don't start that way. Open people's mind up to the feeling you want to portray through a really great story, and then ask for permission to go into the details of your product or program or service. And what's going to happen is that they're going to remember you. In 1999, as I was working at Red Butte Garden, I attended a radio presentation from B98.7. At the time, they said it takes 7 contacts of somebody to see you before they make a purchasing decision. 7. In 2020, I talked to an SEO expert last week. It's 20 contacts before they make a purchasing decision. And if they don't remember you, they're not going to buy. American Idol, Simon Cowell, he watched this song. It was a beautiful song. It was a gorgeous song. And the woman was finished with her song, and I thought it was amazing. And he said it was totally forgettable. And if people don't remember you in 5 minutes, they won't vote for you in an hour. So you have to make sure you're memorable. And I feel like having a really good story that anchors people to your purpose and your passion and to your products is the key that will help you be memorable in the years to come. So I just want to finish off by saying thank you for being here. Thank you for spending your lunch hour with us. If you would like more help crafting your stories, if you'd like help with your messaging, I have 3 tools that can help you. You can go to my website, and Jason listed my website on the chat, johnbojohn.com. And I have a free class on there called 9 Ways to Use Your Website to Grow Your Business. And in there we talk about copywriting, graphic design, and technology. It's totally free. We also have a free audit tool for your website that gives you, it's like a 50-point checkpoint of how your website is doing. And then if you'd like to schedule a one-on-one call, there's a button to do that on my website as well. And I'd love to serve you in any way that I can if you feel like you need help diving into the how of this. So let's go ahead. We have just a few more minutes left. What questions do you guys have for myself or for Jason?
Sarah, can you, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, you go ahead, Sheree. I was just going to ask you, Sarah, if you would quickly just repeat those last 4 things. The second was your anchor your story, 3 was be specific, like using a name, and 4 was convey an emotion. What was the number 1?
You have to have a character. You have to give a specific moment. Give details, and then you want to choose an emotion that you're wanting to talk about.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great presentation.
Thanks for being on. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, it's
Sherry,
nice to meet you.
Did you have a question?
Oh, I was just going to ask, I mean, I guess because I sell heating and air conditioning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, very untangible, and it's very hard to like connect people other than if they are completely out of heating and air conditioning, you know? So unless they're just really broken down and do not have it at all, it's really hard to really build that emotion for them.
Mm-hmm.
But I appreciate the whole storytelling thing, because I think that's one thing for myself that I lack. Is because I've never been a great storyteller anyways. I'm a great communicator, but I'm not a really good storyteller, you know? And so I appreciate that. It's really going to help me be able to dive into how I can use, you know, these examples. Yeah.
Can I brainstorm with you really quickly? Because there's stories in your business, and it doesn't have to be really an emotional story or a really dramatic story, but I would look at your heating and air conditioning, each piece of your heating and air conditioning, and maybe it's like a thermostat, and maybe it's your actual AC unit, and maybe it's your vents. But for example, like what has happened to your clients and your own family in each area of your heating and air conditioning system? So we're actually dealing with some issues with our HVAC right now. And my husband found a towel in our duct system just the other day. And that's kind of funny. Like, I'm not getting a good airflow, and we stuck our hand down there and there's a towel in here. That's so weird. And we pulled the towel out, right? There's a before, an explosion, and an after just in that moment. But you could also describe, like, heating and air conditioning should go unnoticed. That's what it should be doing. So what kind of examples of being in that moment with heating and air conditioning are happening in the home that should go unnoticed? So maybe you could be telling the story of gathering the family for Thanksgiving dinner, and some are on Zoom and some are here, and the heating is gone unnoticed, but without that element, you would be toast. Does that make sense? Like, yeah. Like taking people through that moment when things are going as they should, and describing that moment, I think would be really helpful too.
And so do you think like using a story that has already happened or something that could happen to them? Do you think using like a previous story from a customer would probably be the best way?
I always feel like real stories are better, but you could do hypothetical stories as well if you wanted to. Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, Reagan.
Oh, I was just thinking about Sherry's question. And when you think about HVAC, what are the warning signs? how do you know your HVAC system is actually about to explode? If I'm driving an old car and I can hear it, kunk, 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 I know that car's going to need some attention, and I take it into the mechanic because I'm like, oh, I don't want to be stuck on the highway. Well, what about the HVAC? How does that relate to that type of a story?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
So just kind of a thought.
And you could tell the horror stories. And I'm not a fear monger. I don't like to share stories to incite fear, but people don't take action. They're more likely to take action because of pain. So if you can prevent them from having pain as a servant leader, if you could say, I am an HVAC specialist and I want to prevent you from having this experience at the worst possible time, right? You know, you think about little kids at night bundled up in blankets in the middle of the winter because your HVAC system went out in the middle of the night. Like, what can you do to prevent that from happening? And you could tie that into Santa Claus and the holidays. You could tie that into your New Year's celebrations. Tying it to those details of celebration throughout the year, I think could be really helpful too. So,
Awesome.
you guys, thank you so much for being here. We want to be true to our time. We're just up against the hour, and just want to say thanks for coming. Jason's info is in the chat. My info is in the chat. If you would love to connect on LinkedIn, Jenna, I want to go to lunch with you. It's been too long, but just want to say happy holidays and hope you guys have an incredible end last 2 weeks of 2020. We're going to celebrate with some happy things that have happened.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye, you guys.
Appreciate y'all.
Thank you so much.
Try
Thank
connecting
you.
on LinkedIn later.
Yes, send me an invite. Thanks,
Okay,
guys.
we'll do
Bye.
it.